Welcome to the LowCarbMD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor. We could just pause it.
Hello and welcome to the Low Carb MD podcast. Thanks for joining us. Tro, man, I miss you. It's been too long. Happy 2021. Here we go.
Yeah, it's a new year. It's a new year. We have a very exciting guest today, guys. I'm very excited to have Dr. David Tusek on with us. He is a board-certified family physician who's a member of the Academy of Sports Medicine, the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, and the Institute of Functional Medicine. But besides all that, he's an absolutely great guy, and he is truly a pioneer. We've had, Steve Horowitz, who's been doing direct primary care for a long time in one of the past episodes. And really, we have the great pleasure of having Dr. Tusek, who's been doing direct primary care for over a decade. And so we are very happy to have you here to talk about, well, first, how you got started in direct primary care and how that's affected your relationship with your patients, and how it's given you the time and the energy to kind of look into things that maybe you wouldn't have been able to look into had you stuck to the conventional approach to insurance-based medicine. So thank you for coming on.
Well, guys, thanks so much for having me on. It's a real honor. Love your show. I have to also thank my amazing, beautiful humans that are patients of our practice, that are also prominent members of the carnivore community. They actually put on the carnivore conference here a few years back in Boulder, which is where I'm based, Boulder County, Colorado. And so big shout out to them for the introduction to you guys. So I live in this amazing place that, I've lived in 8 different countries all over the world. I've never felt more blessed and grateful to live in a place more than here. And part of it's really the community that we have here that is so totally open to innovation, to new ideas, to thinking outside the box. And, whenever you come with some alternative perspectives on things, the general ethos of this place is, well, that sounds like a crazy idea, but what the hell, let's give it a try, And with the spirit of that, we've been able to really innovate and use this community as an idea lab on so many levels. And so, my background is in primary care medicine, and I'm a board certified family doc, but I've also, spent a ton of time in working as an ER physician, working inpatient, as a hospitalist, working in nursing homes and college clinic campuses and all kinds of stuff. And when I first came out of training, I immediately began to be interested in functional medicine, which, back then we had ACAM, the American College of the Advancement of Medicine, and we had the Atkins Center in New York City, which is where I spent a lot of time as a resident. And then eventually IFM, A4M, Peptide Society and all of that. And so I've always been interested in combining this approach to, treating various diseases and understanding all of the different therapeutic angles with a deep appreciation for source cause medicine, And then back in 2008, 2009, I began to really be aware of the parts of our healthcare system that isn't working for our patients. And I really had kind of a dark night of the soul after the fanfare of the first Obama inauguration began to sort of settle, and the ACA in its in its entirety became known, you know, and once it was launched, and I'm like, man, you know, this isn't meaningful transformational healthcare reform. I mean, this is an expansion of Medicaid, which we needed to some degree for sure, but it wasn't really getting to the heart of some of the problems that I identified. And so one day I just poured myself a French press pot of coffee and started typing away and sort of said to myself, there's got to be a different way of doing this. And what came out of that 3-hour session was, you know, my kind of prototype version of DPC. And this was way before we'd even coined the term direct primary care. But, you know, much later on, I joined the steering committee in Washington, D.C., and we spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill beginning to sort of campaign around this idea of healthcare reform and policies that would be friendly to direct primary care. And that really sort of started the whole journey, which was sort of originated from a guiding principle that has stayed with me this whole time, the real fundamental purpose, which is finding a way to care for our patients with a reverent devotion to their best interest, to their fullest health, and to their greatest well-being. And, you know, that's always sort of for deepen that further and to optimize. And doing this Bruce Lee move, you know, when they asked Bruce Lee, well, you know, how do you become the master in Kung Fu, or how do you develop the best Kung Fu school? He said, well, that's easy. You look at all of the other schools that are out there and you take what's good from all of them, you add what's missing, and you discard the rest. And so looking at the healthcare system broadly, you know, and grounding it in that purpose of a reverent devotion to our patients' best interest, and then looking at what is good that we want to keep in this amazing system, which is full of miracles and magic and marvelous, you know, cures within the realm of modern medicine, but it's really missing some integral components. And what it's missing from my perspective is the entire half of the pie. You know, we have a fantastic amount of drugs and surgery, but we don't really understand what it means to be healthy, and this whole approach to healing and the origins of health and what it is that we need. What are the components that are necessary for us to thrive and to flourish? You know, that's something that we really, really need to incorporate and integrate and complement to our understanding of pathotherapeutics. And then what we need to discard, you know, that's been a long journey for me to try to be as precise, as intellectually honest and precise as I can be about. And, you know, I'm in such good company, and I know this is stuff that people like you guys spend so much time thinking about too. But for me, it actually took me a while to put my finger on what is really wrong with our healthcare system. And, you know, I've written about this pretty extensively. I call it my 10 heartbreaks, the 10 ways in which the healthcare system sort of broke my heart in the way that it led to, you know, ultimately suffering on behalf of my patients, and finding ways to try to address that, finding ways to heal all of those 10 heartbreaks has been a big, big part of my journey. And then bringing it all together has been kind of the most ambitious project that we're working on, which is called Ravel, which is a brand new marketplace that incorporates all these things I've been talking about. It keeps all the good stuff. It adds what's been missing in the form of all of these 10 problems. It sort of starts to repair these 10 aspects, and then incorporates the approach to health and healing. So I'd be delighted to dig into some of that with you guys some more.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I want to hear more, actually. Yeah, I'm you know, because I think we all came to that same conclusion. For me, 17 years or so in a private practice, just killing myself, 14-hour days. I just couldn't spend enough time with patients. Then there's 3 patients waiting, and I don't think patients and people understand the pressures that the doctors are under in our healthcare system. Then you come in and start talking about alternative medicine, or preventive care, and they're realizing, look, I got 8 minutes with this patient. You and me explained insulin resistance and all this stuff. The doctors don't understand it because they don't have time.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
what I've noticed too is looking at the research. I'm looking at research and it says, look, exercise releases all these hormones. It does all this stuff to break down visceral fat. And they said, we need to find a drug that will do that. I was like, well,
Right.
how about exercise? How about exercise? How about we talk about that? So it's very interesting how everything comes back to a pill in modern medicine.
Totally. Yeah. And I think you're hitting at a number of things. One is, what kind of a protocol or program or system do we design that allows our patients to spend more time with us and vice versa? And then what kind of a payment model do we employ to keep the karma clean between the doctor and the patient, so that we're, the way that they pay for our services comes from a place that, again, is in the spirit of their best interests. And then, how do we integrate that into the greater system at large? And for me, that really starts with, sort of the original sin of the current healthcare system, which is allowing this marriage to take place that should have never taken place, which is that primary care became part of the health insurance bureaucracy. I don't have a problem with health insurance. I think there's so many advantages and wonderful aspects about it, but it has no place in primary care medicine. And that's the first thing that we have to kind of really get and move past and move beyond. Because once we do that, once we unbundle from just all of the burdens of that, I always tell people, look, if a tornado comes through your neighborhood and rips the roof off of your house, you need to go call your Allstate agent or your State Farm agent, and hopefully they'll help you with that. But if your toaster breaks, or you need to wash the windows or refinish the floors, you don't call Allstate to do that. What we provide as primary care doctors in the realm of, adult medicine, pediatrics, gynecology, and urgent care, all of that can be provided 24/7 with unlimited visits and no copays for the cost of a cup of coffee at Starbucks per day. So most PMPMs, or per member per month charges for DPC programs nationwide, of which there are now over 1,300, are somewhere in the $80 a month range per person. And so that by definition, that means you don't need insurance to pay for those types of costs. And, what we provide our patients, and every DPC is a little bit different, but we do all of that, and we bring in the functional medicine, we bring in PRP, and we bring in, peptide therapies, and we bring in advanced diagnostics, and we do everything at a net zero profit, so that we really make sure that we keep that, as I say, karma clean between the doctor and the patient. We're not constantly selling anything to them. We're sort of devoted to advocating for their best health, but also their pocketbook, because currently the healthcare system is still the #1 cause of bankruptcy in the United States. So what can we do to be good stewards of their health as well as their wallet is always on our mind. And I think once we take that step and unbundle from the health insurance system, we can begin to address so many of the other systemic problems and actually get into the stuff that helps support their health and their well-being from a much, much deeper level, because we actually have the time to get into those source causes, all of the lifestyle related stuff, all of the 5 pillars of health, you know, the hydration, nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress reduction. We can dig into how people can reconnect with their bodies a little bit. And so, yeah, I mean, I know we can go down a whole bunch of different tangents here.
I want to chime in here because I want people to understand this problem, because as doctors, I know all three of us understand exactly what you're talking about. And I want to give an example for the listeners so they understand the problem of not having enough time to take care of your patients, and how if your doctor is invested in you, they can actually help you. We had a elderly patient come into our office recently who saw 5 different doctors for a headache, okay, after a fall earlier in the year. And she's been having this headache. She has seen it's the most important thing in her life. It's ruining her quality of life. And it all happened after a fall. Okay, it happened after a fall. So she's been to the emergency room. She has seen 5 different doctors, including neurologists, cardiologists, primary care, geriatrician, everyone. Okay, multiple times. She's been given numerous drugs that have interacted really poorly with her. And, you know, I went to see her lately and recently, and I sat down, and our first visit is an hour and a half. And I went through, well, can you describe the headache to me? And she says, yeah, it hurts right here on my neck, and it hurts when I touch it. Okay. So she's been describing point tenderness in one of her, in a muscle in her neck as a headache. And she's been given barbiturates and, you know, anxiolytics and migraine medications for point tenderness in her back, because nobody sat down. It didn't take 1 minute to figure out, you know, I had to ask her, I had to sit down with her, I had to gain her trust, I had to go through her story, and then I had to ask the quality of her headache to understand that she has point tenderness in a, you know, basically it hurts when she touches this area of her, you know, head and this area of her neck. And I won't get into what diagnosis she has, but people were treating her for migraines. People were treating her for headaches. People were treating her for tension headaches. She's gotten MRIs, CAT scans, right? So the amount of money and people she's seen is insane. And nobody sat down to talk to her ever. She said to me, I have never talked to a doctor this much in my life. So can you help? So what do you feel when you hear this story? What do you feel when I know this is what you're working against, but look at the amount of people who profited. The radiology company profited from all the scans. Each specialist saw her multiple times, got multiple visits through the insurance. The patient didn't benefit at all. The pharmacy benefited from all the prescriptions she filled. So how do we unravel this? Help me understand, because my heart goes out to this person. And this isn't just one person. This is literally every patient is like almost the exact same story. And I'm sure you've heard it a million times. But I don't think people understand this story. You know, this is the problem. So how do we convince people this is a problem? Because most people think like we need Medicare for all. And it's true. We do need to cover everybody everybody deserves great medical care. But I mean, this is a patient who had access to care, had insurance, and was failed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So help me understand, what do we do? How do we identify these problems? Sure, you've identified these problems because you're already working on the solutions, but how do we help people understand the problem? And what are we going to do about this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes so deep and it goes so broad, right? And I think that if we can come back to this idea that we have a calling, right? I think the healthcare system at large is made of very kind, very caring individuals. But we all get stuck in this machinery of how the system works, not in the best interest of those people that we're trying to serve, right? And to add to what you're saying and the suffering on the part of the patients, you know, according to WebMD, an article that I just read about a month ago, we are now as physicians the #1 profession in suicide of all the professions. Every day a doctor takes his or her life, right? So the amount of meaninglessness and jadedness and disillusionment that we have as being participants in this sort of cog and wheel, hamster wheel situation that we've gotten ourselves into with the 7-minute visits that you allude to and everything else actually takes our soul. It removes the one thing that makes all the hard work and the time that we've spent in medical school and residency worthwhile, right? And what that one thing is that makes all that worthwhile is to be able to connect with our patients deeply, to be able to see them as human beings, to take a minute and say, oh, this poor woman has seen 5, 10, or 20 other doctors before me. Maybe I just need to step back for a second and attune to the transmission of her words and figure out what she actually needs and slow down. And if that takes 14 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour and a half, that's okay, you know, because otherwise we're not going to get anywhere, and she's not going to get better, and I'm not going to ever find out what's going on with her. And so that's, I think, the bigger problem or the bigger question. And then we say, all right, well, how do we solve that? And who's going to be this advocate for her? And under what construct can we create a system that allows us, you know, who we have the souls of healers, you know, we want to help people, but how do we actually enable those kinds of transactions to occur so that our relationships are not transactional or extractive or, sorry, ma'am, I got another patient waiting or another 10 patients waiting. I'm here for you and I'm devoted to you. So that's how I would articulate, you know, what we need to begin to build together. And I think there's a point of view there, or a philosophy or perspective. And then there's the pragmatic, well, how do we get this shit done? How do we actually build systems that enable that? And so, you know, again, I believe that starting with a removal and extraction of all of the barriers between doctors and patients is the first move. So what are the barriers that prevent, you know, all of those other doctors that saw your patient before you did and were able to spend an hour with her and figure out that the problem isn't a headache, it's actually something's going on in her neck? What allowed you to do that? And I think time is one of those things, but the arcane billing system is another, right? The whole amount of time and money that we spend trying to extract our fees from this, I mean, it's just absolutely madness. All of the tech that we need to purchase and buy in order for us to actually get paid for these visits, right? And the fact that we're spending $3.3 billion a day on just admin in the healthcare system, right? This doesn't go towards patient care. This is just paper pushing. This is the bureaucratic machinery, and it's totally out of control. And then when you look at the costs of the system in general, you know, the whole Federal Reserve, the entire budget of the US government in 2019 was 3.4 trillion, but we spent 3.8 trillion on healthcare. And by 2027, we're due to spend 6 trillion. Like, we're projected to accelerate at a level that literally is no longer sustainable. So we have the unsustainable costs, we have a system that doesn't work for patients, and we have a system that doesn't work for doctors. So, you know,
Yeah, and you think about that too, and you think about doctors, like what you're talking about, and that's been on my heart a lot with physician burnout, physician suicide.
Yeah,
Each doctor who kills themselves has, on average, 2,000 patients that they're caring for. Those 2,000 people just lost their doctor. Now what? They're going to go to another doctor who's already overworked and overstressed, and they're resenting having more patients. And so this cycle is really a big problem. And the new docs coming out they don't ask questions. I mean, that we lose that most of the time. We're going to get our treatment based on the history of the patient, not a CAT scan, MRI, all these things. Generally, we can talk to them and say, you're having headaches, stomach pain, all this. How's things at home? Guess what? They start crying and they're going through a divorce, or their husband left them, or their husband's cheating on them, or all these things, or their wife's doing crazy stuff. And so if we don't have time to talk about those things, we just start throwing drugs out. Oh, you have heartburn? Here's a pill for heartburn. Oh, here's one for your headache.
Yeah.
Here's one for your blood pressure. Here's one for your sugars going high because you're drinking too much and you're stressed out at night. And so I think, and I think right now with COVID, this has brought it to a head because we are seeing an epidemic of depression, anxiety, stress, and hopelessness in our patients, and that's going to affect your health. There's no doubt about it. And so I think that's where we're missing out, is we're not using, we're just saying, okay, here's a problem, here's a pill, rather than saying, what's the underlying cause? The root cause, as my engineering friends say. We have to figure out why we're having these problems, not just for the symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we actually, like, I will humbly say that I don't think we have a map of what it means to be healthy. We don't have an epistemology of understanding what all those aspects are, and it's extremely fragmented.
Even our
Some of it
labs,
has to
even even our labs are in a sick population.
Yeah.
I think you're hitting the thing. I don't, when somebody comes in and they say I have a normal vitamin D level, I tell them, you mean compared to a sick population that's had low vitamin D for 50 years.
That's right.
So I think you're so right. Doctors don't know what healthy is anymore. 88% are metabolically unhealthy.
Yeah.
More than 2/3, 2/3 are either pre-diabetic or diabetic.
Yeah.
I mean, we are a sick population, and I think you're right. We don't know what health means.
Well, and I think that as you were saying, both of you guys, 2020 has really kind of unmasked a lot of these things, and we have seen things now that we can't unsee. And one of those is that COVID is not the only pandemic, right? We have so many other concurrent, simultaneous ones. It's the pandemic of chronic disease, with all of the neurodegenerative, cardiovascular, and cancer illnesses going continuously through the roof. We have a significant increase in autoimmune and allergic diseases. We have the addiction and the meaning crisis that you mentioned. We have this crisis of cost. And, that's just kind of in the realm of conventional healthcare. But we also have this other crisis, which is we have a profound amount of collective trauma as a nation, and a scar that simply hasn't healed from our legacy of racism and all of the decimation of the indigenous tribes. That, like, that's a real thing, right? And we're going to have to somehow address that. We're going to have to somehow face that. And then third, the other thing that 2020 unmasked was this profound sense of vulnerability and fragility in terms of community resilience, right? And, like, you can see that the various stressors and crises that we are yet to face, we're just not prepared to deal with them. What are we going to do with the next pandemic, or the next grid failure, or the next large-scale cyber attack, or the next distribution channel crisis for food due to climate change? So I think that looking at this from not just what does it mean to be a healthy individual, right, but also how does health relate to resilience, and how does individual health and resilience relate to community health and resilience? Because all of this stuff is nested in our own ecosystems where we live, in our own communities. And I really see the primary care renaissance that I believe is coming in 2021. I think that this has been a long time in coming, and finally the stars are really beginning to align, and people like yourselves and so many other people nationwide are involved in saying, guys, what we have now is simply not working. We have to look at it, ideally. And I think primary care is ideally suited for this because we're the guys that are the generalists. We're not focused on specializing on an ankle. We have a much broader perspective on what's going on with our patients, what's going on in our communities. And we have this view from 30,000 feet, but we're also insiders. And we've peered into all of the aspects and all of the areas of our healthcare system. And I believe that it really is up to us. It's up to the primary care providers and physicians nationwide to step back and say, all right, how do we do this better? And so, that's really where our project Ravel comes in, because it's a new marketplace for not just sick care, which we need, and I'm very, very grateful for, but it's also exactly all the stuff that we've been talking about, right? So it begins with a deep inquiry of identifying and mapping out all of the origins and the elements and the components of the stuff that we need to be healthy, to thrive and to flourish as individuals and as communities. Then you identify all of the areas locally. So this is built to be a hyper local platform that can be then scaled to many other communities nationwide. So identifying locally, what are all the organizations and businesses and projects and individual enterprises devoted to providing goods and services that are supportive of that health and supportive of that healing. So identifying where the health starts and then who's involved in supporting it in the community. And then the platform sort of is not just a marketplace for purchasing and organizing and cataloging all of those health generating services, but it also becomes a sustainable financial revenue model to support many of those ventures, many of those enterprises, because a lot of them are quite vulnerable, right? And so we're really looking at this as a form of a UBI for community enterprises that are devoted to supporting the health and the healing of that local population. And yes, that includes, having a place to purchase primary care and a place to purchase catastrophic major medical. But it also includes farmers. I think when you look at and you ask about health on a second grade level and people say, well, you are what you eat. It's like, well, what does that really mean? And, we've gotten so far away, as we all know, from understanding what it even means to eat a healthy diet and where food comes from that actually is nourishing to our bodies and to ourselves. And so, part of this new healthcare marketplace is bringing into just the conception of what we need to be healthy, local farmers, organic producers of vegetables and fruits and so on, ranchers that, raise livestock in a way that is good for the animals and good for the soil and good for the water and good for the air, and bringing them out, celebrating them, supporting them, and telling people, yeah, not only should you sign up for a DPC program and get a major medical program, but you should also sign up for a CSA so that the meat that you're getting is, not been full of hormones and antibiotics and pesticides and actually going to make you sicker. So, that's really
I
what
can't
this
agree with you.
platform is
I
about.
can't. And the reality is if you go to a doctor's office right now, I'm obesity medicine certified. And if you go around the New York City metro area to my colleagues, instead of finding information on how to get better food, what you'll get is a bunch of soups and shakes and Medifast and Longo MD, Prolong MD packs, you know, which are basically selling you high-priced garbage, I'd say. You know, it's not right. You know, it's not right. And I 100% agree with you. We have to put these people together, the people that are doing better than we're currently getting, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
I'm 100% on board with that too. And that's what I do. I have local trainers who are doing a great job. And I say, look, patients, he'll give you a discount if you're my patient, and I'll give his clients a discount too, because together we can accomplish great things, you know? And so I think that's a huge point in having farmers who are in this system that, you know, they can sell their goods, and you bring in a lot of people who are really out there to help. The YMCAs or the gym say, hey, give my patients a discount, because I have to be valuable for someone to pay me direct primary care fees. And I think a lot of times people miss the boat. When you step back and like you were saying, you're not paying your insurance if you're not going to your insurance company if your toaster breaks. Like, that's what our primary care, we're the toaster fixer guys. We don't charge a lot of money, and it's not, people have this conception in their brain of how much medicine costs. Like, I can't have a high deductible plan because, you know, but they have no copay when they come in, right? They have no, like, all these things, they don't realize what they're paying for, and even the copay on their meds. Like, you know, I have a family, I think they've come off 12 medications, just $10 copay on each one of those. That pays my salary for the month, right? So you start realizing, man, it's really crazy how we're so confused. As a matter of fact, like Tro, when you were talking about that lady, I had a lady yesterday, she's been struggling with her weight, and her doctor won't get an insulin level. They say, you don't need it. She's seen 3 endocrinologists. No one's got an insulin level on her. And then finally she went online and ordered her own, and she goes, for $10, they won't order a test. Like, has told me more than anything, and that would have cost $10. How much has she paid in copay, seeing all the 3 endocrinologists, 2 specialists, and she's been all over she wants to get healthier, but they're giving her bad advice. So it's like, okay, here's what we have to do. Is there hope for me? Yes, there's hope. Here's what we're gonna do, right? Because she has no muscle mass and she has a lot of visceral fat. So you go, okay, let's attack that problem, because you can't be on 6 drugs to treat the dang problem that's lifestyle related.
That's right. Yeah, never mind. I mean, get the insulin level and then slap a $31 with the coupon, Freestyle Libre CGM on her for 2 weeks. And, you know, she'll have a lot of insight about what's going on with her glycemic control very, very quickly. So
she put it on last night, as a matter of fact. Yeah, and her son also. So yeah, that's what I mean. We'll get data. And like you said, 2 weeks, we don't have to do it for 6 years. 2 weeks, we get our data, and you understand, and she learns. And so patients come to me and say, oh, you know what spikes me? This does. And they know, right? And plus it's accountability too. So it is incredible. I was telling Tro before you came on, out of all my patients that I've seen this year so far, I've had 2 people gain less than 1.5 pounds. Otherwise, everyone else lost weight during the holidays and COVID. That's ridiculous. I've never seen that before. In January, what were we doing? Oh, your sugar's out of control. We're going to put you on more meds to get rid of get your sugars under control, right? Because they blew it during the holidays, and they mess up their metabolic system. So yeah, I think it's fun to see that. I think, wow, it's amazing. I've had people lose 6.8, 7.2 pounds in 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year's. That's ridiculous. That's incredible. If you can hold your own, you're happy, right? Because the average American is gaining 5 to 10 pounds. So anyways, these kind of things are what we have to really focus on, and the prevention we do now is going to pay off down the road for sure in these patients and the system.
Exactly. And, you know, I think the other thing I just want to quickly point out is, you know, we have 3 basic tiers or categories of healthcare purchasing in America. You know, we have people who are on Medicare or Medicaid. We have people who work for IBM or a large corporation, and then we have everybody else, right? We have everybody else who's the small business owners or the independent contractors. And for those people, creating a very simple plan where you combine DPC plus a health share cuts their healthcare spend by 50% on average, right? So the average family of 4 here in Colorado who go on the healthcare exchange to purchase their healthcare insurance for all the stuff that we've been talking about, the high deductible Kaiser plans, you know, where There's no way in hell anybody's going to get an insulin level. There's no way that anybody's going to get more than that 7-minute visit. Those crappy products cost $1,500 to $2,000 for that family of 4. If you combine DPC plus a healthshare, which covers your major medical component very well, that charge for that family of 4 is somewhere between $650 and $750 a month. So it's less than half. So not only are you getting a deeper connection with your doctor and hopefully a more functionally informed kind of approach, but you're saving huge amounts of money, amounts of money that approach a mortgage payment for many people. And, with that, you can then have more money to take more yoga or go skiing more or buy better quality meat or any of the number of things that are actually going to move the needle on your overall health. And that's really what we're all about.
Can I play a little bit of devil's advocate? Okay, so
Sure.
I know that with these health shares, and I agree with you. Look, I'm a DPC, practice here. A lot of the criticism that has come from attorney generals from various states on these health shares is that they're unregulated, unlike insurance companies. And we know that we know California's come after some health shares. We know New York has come after health shares. So how do we make sure that, because look at the insurance industry was awful. I mean, they canceled people's insurance when they got cancer. They're obstructionists in, for imaging in labs that are potentially necessary and helpful. How do we know that healthshare won't just do the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's a
super valid question.
Yeah. So how do we know?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I don't know that there's anything that's a sure thing, right? But I completely agree with you that, anyone who thinks that they're in good hands with Allstate when it comes to commercial insurance, under every circumstance and every condition, you have a lot of grief coming oftentimes when you realize that the stuff that you actually really, really want to obtain is not covered. That there's all kinds of exclusions and so on and so forth. And yes, to your point, the whole rescission problem where, people have been declined their coverage for cancer-related services were denied because of a pre-existing condition and all of that kind of stuff that we read about in the papers with commercial insurance is a real problem. With health shares, I mean, here's what I can tell you, and I've been working with them, and I'm agnostic. I just want my patients to be covered. I want them to have a major medical plan, and whether that's Kaiser, Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross, or whether that's Sedera or Liberty, doesn't matter to me in the end. But what I have seen in my experience is that most of the commercial insurance companies don't take a very caring approach to their patients. Whereas, I mean, I've seen, I've witnessed a great deal of interactions with healthcare companies that come from a completely different place, where they actually do care, where they actually go out of their way to cover things that they don't even have to cover. So I think they're not all the same. I think that there's big differences between them. I think some of the ones, for example, those profiled by the New York Times recently, probably didn't have the same ethics as some of the other ones that we work with. And, I guess my main point is that we need to experiment. The current system isn't working well as it is. And I think we need to just play through a whole bunch of different scenarios where we're able to be innovative. And, I'm not suggesting that health shares solve all the problems, but I think for a certain number of people, including my family, they're they're a very, very reasonable choice. But yeah, you need to be careful. You need to look at the fine print. You have to understand the fact that they don't cover things related to drugs and alcohol. And so, you know, if you are
Yeah,
in a motor vehicle accident and you break your femur and you need orthopedic surgery, they'll cover you unless the ER report shows that your blood alcohol level is 500, in which case they're like, we're not paying for a dime. You should have called Uber. You know, so it's a little different than commercial insurance in many different ways, but I still think it has an important role in the healthcare ecosystem.
yeah, my family, I stepped out of that you know, I'm into that model now. I stepped out of the traditional insurance, and the amount of money I've saved over the last, you know, 5 years is staggering. I was looking at our
Yeah.
healthcare, you know, insurance costs going up and up and up, and I'm like, forget it, you know, because if you have $100 deductible here and there, that's cheaper than, you know, I mean, and especially when people don't realize. I sent someone from an MRI the other day, it was $400, right? I mean, if they're paying $1,500 a month and then they can cut that down to $150 a month, they're saving that a ton of money. If they put that money in the bank and are responsible for if they do have to do a copay or something like that. And that's why the marriage between direct primary care and these kind of plans, you know, like the health share type plans is valuable because direct primary care, I'm not charging them a copay when they come in. They're covered for all their primary care
Yeah.
needs, and that's going to be 98% of their needs, right? If they get to a major accident, they're covered. That's why I absolutely agree with what you're saying, because we don't want people to say, well, I'll just do direct primary care and have no insurance. That's a disaster waiting to happen, right? Because
No, that's
you have a heart attack, you're in trouble. You're going to be in there and get stents and a bypass surgery. And then, you know, our job's to prevent that from happening in the first place. But yeah, you need to be covered. You have to have, you know, coverage for catastrophic. And I think that was when the ACA came out. I had a lot of patients in my old practice that were multimillionaires, so they could self-insure. They go, hey, I want to cover anything over 10 grand. They would have a high deductible, and they go, I'll pay cash for everything else. Who cares? And I go to the doctor twice a year, right? So, but they want to be covered if they have a heart attack. Yeah, they're covered for anything over, you know, whatever $5,000 or $10,000 deductible, which is what they have under the ACA anyways. And a vast majority of people never pay that in a year, so they're wasting their money for the most part, right?
And most of them aren't multimillionaires, but they still have the $10,000 deductible, right? And that MRI, when it's contracted through their commercial plan, doesn't cost $400. It costs $2,000 or $3,000, which goes against their deductible. And as you pointed out, when they're part of a DPC, it's like, hey, we can do that echo for 200, or those X-rays for 60, or that ultrasound for 190, not 10 or 20x those numbers, right? And so that goes back to being that good steward of our patients' healthcare spend. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important point because, you know, a lot of us, we're fearful of getting that big bill, right? Every month, and you can't budget for it because you don't know when it's coming. So if you're wise and you say, let me do, you know, one of these health share plans, it saves you a lot of money in the long run, you know. And in my experience, I have a friend who had $1 million bill. He had cancer. He went through all this treatment, and $1 million. His copay was $100 off $1 million. That is mind blowing to me, right? And no insurance would have done that because you have a $20 or 20% that you're paying anyways. So he saved. He goes, you know how much money I saved by not having traditional insurance, right? In that setting. Now, obviously, there's going to be problems, like you said. If you're, you know, you basically what they're doing from a business model is they're pooling for healthy people who care about their health. There's no better fit than direct primary care with that model, right? Because they're taking care of themselves. They're not going to have as many healthcare needs as other people are. So, you know, it's really important to understand when we start peeling back. And, you know, some people, you know, I have people that are using GoodRx, and their cost of the medicine is less than what their copay would be through their insurance. And they're getting mad now because like, this is ridiculous. I've been paying, you know, a $60 copay all the time. Now I get the medicine for $8. It's ridiculous. It's crazy, right? So I think there's a lot of stuff in healthcare that we're going to have to fix because, you know, if you go to the ER and you see what the charges are, it is unbelievable, like what people are paying for these things. And you know, for a Band-Aid, they're paying $12 for a Band-Aid, you know, crazy up charges because they know the insurance isn't going to pay that, right? So the problem is no one knows what the cash pay price is, you know, for a colonoscopy, for instance, unless we band together with gastroenterologists and say, hey, how much are you going to charge my patient for a colonoscopy? And that's what I'm doing with people now. What's your cash pay price for people who don't want to go through if they have a $5,000 deductible, like what's their cash pay price, And so it's remarkable what people will do because they don't want to deal with the hassles of billing also.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's such a key part of it. And the other key part of, the spirit of DPC is this idea of our patients don't go to the ER unless they have a life-threatening emergency. If you have a panic attack, asthma attack, a laceration, nosebleed that won't stop, migraine that won't break. I mean, these are reasons why people constantly all over this country end up in the emergency room, waiting for 4 hours, getting coughed on by 50 people with COVID in the waiting room, and then getting a bill for 5 to 10 grand for a fish hook removal. I mean, these things don't happen in the realm of direct primary care because you just call your doctor, we unlock the office, we take out the fish hook, we put your stitches in, we treat urosepsis, we have mobile IV infusion and nutrient IV infusions, come to your house at 10 o'clock at night, hydrate you, you get your Rocephin shot. I mean, all of this stuff can be done responsibly, carefully, literally for either no charge or for $100, for the mobile IV, as opposed to, 5 or 6 digits if you go down the ER and hospital pathway. So again, thank God for our hospitals, and sometimes we absolutely need them, but we're overusing these extremely high cost areas of healthcare completely unnecessarily. And the heart of primary care and the renaissance of primary care that we're all calling for to happen is going to turn that around.
Yeah, and I think if we practice medicine wisely, I think COVID has really, for me, it's incredible. I have friends, they call their doctor, I have a fever, what should I do? Go to the ER. Go to the ER. That's
Exactly.
they have strep throat, go to the ER. You know how much that's going to cost, right? So now I could do COVID testing, 15 minutes, I have an answer. If you're symptomatic, I don't test asymptomatic people, but we can at least say, hey, is it COVID or is it not? Or we can say, is it strep? Can we check for strep? Can we check for flu? Can we check to see what you got? Because it's insane what's happening right now. Because everyone's just, they're in San Diego. The numbers that this is as of a week ago. I haven't looked this week, but we had 39 cases of influenza. Last year we had 22,000 at the same time. Did they disappear? Right. So,
Right.
and it's the same thing in Arizona. I've had doctors from all over the country go, yeah, guess how many we've had so far? And it's like, wow, that's weird, because we're not looking. If you don't look, you don't find it. Just like Tro's patient, they weren't looking, they didn't touch her neck right here and say, oh, that's where you have point tenderness. Not like, let's get an MRI, CAT scan, we'll send you for all these things, because the doctor doesn't want to miss something. And so this is where our healthcare, when you talk about the trillions of deficit, that's what we're doing. We're spending so much money because we're afraid, and we don't have time to talk to the patient and say, oh, how much money could have been saved if they went to Tro first, the system. So they should be thanking direct primary care. Why? They don't have to pay us a copay. And like you said, a lot of those plans you're talking about, I have patients with full coverage with some HMOs where they could go there and get everything, and they come to me because they say every time I go there, the doctor just throws another drug on, never talks to me about diet. They might give me a pamphlet that says, eat less fat, exercise more. You know what I mean? That's it. And their diabetes is out of control. And, so it's people are frustrated. I think they've had enough and enough suffering and enough cost. So I think, what you're talking about with Ravel and different approaches to say, look, let's band together and make it cost effective for the patient to be healthy and maintain health.
Mm-hmm.
And not wait till they're on the ventilator and they say, oh, maybe we should have worked on that insulin resistance you have and vitamin D deficiency. So I think there's going to be a lot of people who get very frustrated with the system. They already are, because they're feeling terrible. They want to feel better. They don't want just another drug. They want to feel better. And, and I think the other thing is that we're cheating the system in direct primary care and metabolic health because people are self-selecting who care about their health. Otherwise, they wouldn't be paying us. 80% of the people really don't care. The 20% we could do amazing things with. But if I have an unwilling audience, then they're not going to change. Like a guy yesterday goes, I don't want to give up my Oreos. I was like, you're wasting your money with me then, probably, right? If you're going to eat Oreos every day, I really can't help you. I can't taper your insulin medicines. can't help you. If we get you to cut back and we take steps, and then he ultimately agreed when I went through the data to make some lifestyle changes, right? Otherwise, you're wasting your time and money and wasting my time, honestly, because there's other people I can help.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah, it makes it worth, being a doctor again. And I think that there was times in all of our careers where we've wondered whether this was the right move. And I can tell you that ever since I transitioned to direct primary care, that has never, ever entered my mind. And it's so fulfilling. And it's, and honestly, my favorite part of this game now, of this sacred journey, is leaning into people like the guy with the Oreos that you described, and tuning into, well, what is it about you that doesn't want to give that up? Like, what's going on there? Where's the resistance, man? Are you kidding me? You're going to end up with chopped off feet. You're going to be blind and on dialysis. Is that really what you want, bro? And I know that's not what you want. And so what's going on, and how can we get into some of those interior aspects where, you haven't faced some of your demons and faced some of your shadows? Try to do that in 7 minutes. Not going to happen.
Yeah, and that's the whole point. That's the whole point. And by the end, he was a changed guy. Hopefully that continues to. And his wife was all in, and just doing some education. Go, look, here's the deal. Here's what it looks like. And so, I think that is the cure for physician burnout. And obviously there's other factors for suicide, but I'm thinking when doctors go, and we all know. I mean, the three of us know how much dedication, how many missed holidays, missed birthdays, or whatever, and we're studying and working hard, and then you get out there and want to save the world. You realize I'm not helping people. I'm struggling at home because I'm working 14 hours, and you're not taking vacations. I mean, direct primary care, I'll tell you already. Even though I took a pay cut, I really did. It's worth every second, every time, every dime, because I took a week off between Christmas and New Year's for the first time in 18 years. Spent time with my wife and kids, right? And so, and I didn't have 500 calls like to come back to, and the patients. I'll tell you the other thing. Really, just last night I called a patient after hours because he was having a problem. He's a high power attorney in town. He goes, "Doctor, I am so sorry to bug you. I go, hey, this is what you're paying for, man. It's never an inconvenience. Right. This is what you're paying me for. This is the advantage of having me." And he's like, so happy because he goes, my other doctors won't call me back.
That's
right.
Like,
and it's when you have that and you say, I'm helping this guy, and I can make a couple of phone calls and get him dialed in with a urologist and get him seen right away. And so that's the thing, is our relationship with other docs, our relationship with other patients, and to have the time to do what we do. That's a cure for burnout for sure.
Oh yeah, I love that part of it, man. It touches on the number one question that people ask. It's like, well, aren't you inundated? If everybody has your cell phone and email and they can text you, aren't you just inundated all night long? And what happens very, very quickly is there's a deep mutuality that arises, right? And people respect your time and you respect their time, and they know that you're going to be there. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they have an acute abdomen, they'll call you, but they don't call you at 3 o'clock in the morning telling you that they can't sleep and they're lonely. They have this sense of awe that it's like, oh my God, I have my doctor on speed dial. This is awesome. And I'm not going to abuse that privilege. And, it's very much a two-way street, and it allows that trust and that sense of reliance and that trust of that sense of rapport to just evolve over time. And yeah, it's one of the great things about it.
I can't agree more. I want to give some time, guys. Everything you guys are saying, I absolutely agree with. And certainly maybe, Brian, we can start with some questions from the audience if they have any. And I got a question for you, and hopefully you can answer it. So guys, if you have a question, you can just write it in and we'll bring it up here.
And also, wait, real quick, Dr. Tusek, before we get too carried away, how do people get in touch with you if they want to search you out?
Yeah, I mean, we have a website called cloudmedical.io, and I do a lot of blogging. I've been on a podcast before, so we always post those. And then, we have a practice in Boulder County, although, in some cases we take people from all over the country, as long as they establish care here in Colorado at least once or twice with us. And then our new project, which is just getting off the ground, is called Ravel.health. Super exciting. And yeah, those are the two main ways.
Awesome. And we'll put those in the show notes so everyone can track you down. So Troy, what's your question, man?
Yeah, it's about, you talked about innovation and how really, if you look at the medical system, really I'd say, unfortunately, the biggest innovation to come to the medical system has been telehealth. And you also mentioned a medical device you use, the Libre. So a lot of this innovation has not come from doctors. So how do you think is the best way we can spark innovation from our colleagues, spark innovation from the medical community, particularly the doctors, the PAs, to deliver better and better care? And I'll tell you where I think the state of all this is. It's dismal. So you mentioned that the CGMs that you use. We went to Abbott Diabetes. We talked to we talked to them about integrating the data through something a little bit more sophisticated than LibreView, which is their platform. And they're like, oh, besides Kaiser, nobody's asked for that. Or I don't know, it wasn't Kaiser. Besides some big system, nobody's asked for that. And I'm like, no doctor has asked for that?
Yeah.
So all of this data is sitting there, and no doctor in the United States has asked for better access to this data. So how do we inspire? Because I think this is, the suicide, the burnout, right? It is a symptom, and this lack of innovation is a symptom. Doctors are just done.
Yeah.
So tell me what you think the best way we can inspire these doctors.
Man, that's a big one. I think that we have so many cool tools, right? They're out there, and we have to aggregate them. And I agree with you. It's not coming from the AAFP. We're not learning about them through our, organizations in the mainstream system at all. Truthfully, many of us are learning about them from people like you, from people like Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, and Mark Hyman, and people who are spreading the word through alternative media channels besides just the old standard industry conferences that you go to once a year. And so whether it's all of the sensor applications, when the Cardia AliveCore app first came out, way before the Apple Watch, and you could get a single lead EKG on anybody in real time, as opposed to, I had these weird palpitations when I was hiking over the weekend. And you do an EKG in the office 3 days later and it's normal. It's like, well, I wonder what happened when you were hiking, So we have CGMs, we have portable EKG devices. We have just phenomenal apps for digestion. The Food Marble is a really interesting device that we use a lot, where you can breathe into a little sensor that connects to your iPhone and then measures your hydrogen gas levels. And that's related to digestion, microbiome function. And they're all out there. In terms of how do we aggregate them, I think there's just so much resistance in the healthcare system because it is so centrally focused on pharmaceutical synthetic drugs and surgery. And so if you go back to the 80s, man, there were what was his name? Leo.
Oh, we lost your audio there.
Leaky gut?
Oh.
Right.
Yeah, we're back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
back.
Yeah, we could restart that part just so Jack can get it.
Yeah, he was talking about leaky gut syndrome. You know, he was talking about gluten sensitivity. I mean, that did not enter the realm of gastroenterology until at the very earliest, like 2015, 2005, 2008, sometime around there, when Alessio Fasano began to write about this stuff. So, you know, I think that there are the tip of the spear and the avant-garde and the cutting edge pioneers out there. And I think my lens and guiding principle that has really served my practice well, and I believe has served my patients well, is the lens of the risk-benefit ratio, right? So if we look at every decision that we make in healthcare from the perspective of, okay, what's the upside versus the downside here? You know, when we're looking at using a diagnostic tool or a therapeutic one, whether we're putting somebody on a statin or whether we're putting them on a CGM and a low carb diet and some intermittent fasting, you know, let's assess very carefully to the best of our ability, what is the potential risk and harm compared to the benefit? And this is where naturopathy, functional medicine, herbalism, and these perspectives or worldviews, I think, vastly outclass the conventional mainstream healthcare paradigm. That's not to say we throw out the baby with the bathwater, but as MDs, I think we have to learn that, you know, dude, we're the guys that our oath when we receive our medical school diploma is to do no harm. It's the Hippocratic Oath. We are the third leading cause of death in America, you know, according to JAMA published studies by Barbara Starfield. First in 2000, now repeated in 2016 at Johns Hopkins. When you add up all the iatrogenic diseases, conditions, you know, medical errors, drug interactions, so on and so forth, it's the third leading cause of death. So, like, we really need to take an honest look at the big picture of how we're practicing, what we're doing, learn from our colleagues and some of these other more naturally oriented approaches to health and healing. And then again, do the Bruce Lee move, like, let's use what's good, add what's missing, discard the rest. So that definitely includes the tech and the new fancy diagnostics. You know, it includes being able to say, yeah, you know, just because the mainstream paradigm doesn't have a whatever approved test for microbiome assessment, there is such a test. Like, you know, the DSL GI map is an excellent way to make sure that your gut isn't full of pathogenic viruses, bacteria, parasites, or yeasts. Like, that's a tool that I have found to be extremely helpful in my practice. You know,
Man, that's
it's
awesome.
not
I mean, yeah.
it's not considered mainstream. It's not considered mainstream to do a complete and total hormone, like check every hormone in your body, not just testosterone, but let's check FSH and LH. Let's check prolactin. Let's do a real good overview to make sure that there's nothing else that's causing your low T, you know? And well, no, that's not the mainstream way to do it. Well, that's okay, but there's some good basis and rationale to do it that way. And, you know, the obstacles that have.
Oh, I think we lost audio, Tro.
Oh,
No, you're
sorry.
back. The rationales you were saying.
Yeah, the rationale for why we shouldn't do that has generally been, well, because it's too expensive. You know, it's generally been because running that panel of every hormone in your body through LabCorp using a commercial insurance is going to charge that patient $2,500. It's like, yeah, but, you know, we don't have to do it through LabCorp. We can find other lab partners that do it for a fraction. And, you know, we do comprehensive hormone panels for around $200. The same thing goes for the guidelines for breast cancer screening. You know, if you read the review article this summer that came out that compared mammography in women with dense breasts. First of all, okay, who's a woman with dense breasts? Pretty much anyone under the age of 60, right? Anyone who's not overweight. I mean, many women in that demographic have very dense breasts. So mammography has demonstrated a very poor sensitivity and specificity in those particular women, whereas MRI is vastly superior, right? And the only reason that we can't just say, well, why don't we just do MRIs for all of these women, is because of cost. But as we've been talking about, through being, good stewards of our patients' healthcare spend, we can identify partners in our community that provide MRIs at a much lower cost. Sometimes the MRI is actually cheaper than using the mammogram through the conventional channels. So it just takes looking at the system from a slightly different angle, looking at our patients from the perspective of a reverent devotion to their best interests, as well as their pocketbooks, looking at what kind of partnerships we can cobble together locally to support our community health. And again, doing all of that helps us keep our soul, helps us love what we do and practice in a way that is in coherence with the original reason that we all went into medicine in the first place.
Man, this is a great hour. Thank you both. I really appreciate this. This is great. I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about. That's why, we're so happy doing this kind of medicine and being able to spend that time. So Doc, thank you so much. I got a patient waiting, Tro, so I gotta
Nope,
exit.
it's okay. Me too. We'll call it a wrap.
Yeah.
Dr. Tusek,
Yeah.
from Cloud Medical in Boulder. Listen, thank you so much for your time, and you are doing amazing things. Both being a pioneer on the DPC front, a champion of our patients, and certainly there's some interesting things here with Ravel. And we're really excited, and we're happy to have you back. So maybe we can bring you back in a year or so, and we can find out what's going on with Ravel. And we're happy to call you a colleague and a friend.
Man, thanks so much, guys. Really honor all that you're doing, and yeah, love to be back sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. It was awesome. And our Patreon supporters, thank you so much for keeping us going. We wouldn't be doing this right now without you, so we greatly appreciate it. And and thanks for listening. And everyone listen to this stuff. Maybe reassess, take a look at your finances, look where you're at, because I'm very pleased with direct primary care and a lot of the health sharing programs out there. But the main thing is, take your health seriously. Don't take our opinion for it. Go and check it out. Look at the research and see how you respond. So, stay healthy, stay well, and thank you so much for your support and for listening.